Depeche Mode had probably been going, as far as the media were concerned, as far as I was concerned, no more than 9 months, maybe 10 months. And Dan said, "I've got to tell you some news. Vince is leaving the band." I went, "He can't be leaving the band. We've only just got there. We've just had 3 hit records. And Vince is leaving."
My initial reaction was hell. There was, is he coming back? Is he not? Has he gone for good?
The deed was done, yeah. It's like packing in your girlfriend, you know. You can't go back, you know.
Yes, he's definitely gone for good. Then there was a period where, from our side of stuff, do you think Depeche are going to continue?
I think at press people were, well, they're just going to implode now, because, you know, what's going to happen? There's not going to be a Depeche Mode. And I remember people being very interested in what Vince was going to do and Vince's next project.
He announced it at such an odd time. I'm not even sure if the album had been released.
It's like, what the hell are you doing? You know, you've got the sort of opportunities that most people would kill for. I was just being a miserable bastard, you know. I think that I was going to do something. We started bickering and there were more arguments, especially when we were in the tour bus. And I just got fed up with it, really.
He came to me and he said, you know, I don't think this is something I want to do, and I don't like all the questions we get asked. I don't like doing interviews. I don't like doing TV. I didn't like touring. You know, he said all these things, and I was like, Vince, that's what we're going to be doing.
I think the band were really pissed off. I know they were, you know. I think that because they felt I'd left them in the lurch.
I think he just felt that he could do it on his own.
When I made the decision to leave Depeche, it was, no, I did think that I wouldn't be recording again. I was going to get a job, actually. But I did a demo with Alison Moyet, played it to Daniel, and Daniel just about showed enough interest.
And then the next thing we knew was, you know, Vince and Alison, and we had this, you know, as a PR company, we had Yazoo to kind of contend with and work with as well.
The success of Yazoo was incredible. It was very difficult to think that one day, at this time, Depeche, in fact, will be one day much bigger.
In some ways, for Mute, it must have been a blessing because, you know, Vince went on to become successful.
You don't need that.
Yeah. It was probably Daniel who actually told him to leave.
Daniel was kind of, I don't know whether by design or by accident, was fairly good at shepherding the situation.
Everybody was knocked back, but I don't think anybody felt that it was the end of the band. In fact, the band in particular were very determined to move on, you know.
I remember Dan's exact word. He said, "It's going to be all right, Neil. Don't worry, it's going to be all right. Martin can write some songs." And I thought, oh, God, what are we doing?
It really didn't sort of worry us that much. It should have worried every other band when your main songwriter departs. But we didn't even think about it. It was just, we're carrying on, yeah.
We discussed what we were going to do about replacing Vince, and we thought, well, the band thought that there wouldn't be a straight replacement initially because to kind of draft somebody into the band, but they needed an extra keyboard player for live.
We put an advert in the NME for synthesizer player under 21.
I had been in and out of several bands in the period leading up to my joining. At that time, I was just sort of looking around for another job, something that was going to pay the wages. And there was this advert in the Melody Maker, And I kind of almost knew who it was immediately, even though it didn't say from the advert, because I'd just read somewhere the week before that they'd lost a member. And I thought, oh, it's probably Depeche Mode, you know, even though I didn't know that much about them at the time.
We auditioned at Blackwing, usual, and all these, you know, strange and wonderful characters showed up, and they were all, you know, dressed up to the nines but couldn't play. And then Al came along and could play anything. We thought we'd really get him by like asking him to play like a, you know, a bass line and a melody at the same time, and you know, he did it. And we were like, wow, this guy's like amazing.
When I went to the initial audition, it did seem very simple what they were asking me to do, you know, very simple one-line tunes and a bit of backing vocal. But apparently many people had struggled to do that, and I didn't.
And I think they were a bit intimidated by him as well, because he was such a good keyboard player. You know, they were struggling playing the notes, he was just kind of, you know, reading the newspaper and playing at the same time.
So he was in, and I think we paid him some ridiculous amount, like 100 quid a week or something. You know, we gave him 100 quid a week for like the first couple of years, till he finally turned around and was like, you know, am I in the band?
It wasn't initially apparent, it was a steadying hand.
It was more like a band who were together than three guys and Vince who wasn't having a good time. So in that sense, the machine was not broken, it was just changed.
Charlie Wilder's first gig, wasn't that at Crocs?
He played at Crocs, yeah.
And then, within the space of days, I think we were whisked off to New York to play a gig, and I think that was the first sort of proper gig.
We did Top of the Pops and then got Concord over for our first gig, so we didn't go on stage at the Ritz till 3 o'clock in the morning. None of our synths were working. Dave, meanwhile, had decided to have one of his tattoos removed, and it all gone septic. So we had a lead singer, a dancing lead singer with a septic left arm, like in a sling. So it didn't look very good. And I remember we came off and it was really tight. It must have been about 5 o'clock in the morning. We got out of that place and the Ritz, and this bloke shouted to us, "What happened to you guys? You used to be good." We all of us remember that comment and feeling really down. And it was just one of those tours, you know. It was just it wasn't that successful. It was just, you know, and we just honestly thought that our music would never ever be compatible with what the Americans want.
The other three decided that they wanted to make a Broken Frame on their own. Otherwise, it would have been perhaps perceived that Alan was just pulling the strings as people thought Vince was. So people got confused, and I think a lot of fans thought that after the first bout of touring, Alan had left because the album came out and he wasn't mentioned on it. But for them, it was the best move because they wanted to prove that they could do it on their own.
I think to a certain extent there was, we don't know what to do, and also he is not one of us. And I think individually, if you'd kind of consulted them, they would have all said, I think he should be a member of the group. But do it collectively, and you're into committee land, and you know, if anybody can muddy waters, Depeche collectively can do that. We felt sorry for him, but understood what they were doing, and that was that.
We went in the studio and Martin was given the tall order to come up with like 10 songs.
I hadn't really heard very many of his songs, but the others had and knew his potential.
I think at the time I was quite excited about it. It was the obvious choice for me to take over because at that point Dave didn't even write songs.
Well, Martin was in some ways a more experienced songwriter already than Vince. Martin had been writing songs since the age of 14, and he wrote some fantastic songs then, of which some of those songs he wrote then made it onto A Broken Frame.
I knew Martin wrote good songs because I'd heard his previous band, Norman and the Worms. They were kind of quite unconventional. His taste is so oddball as well. I think that's reflected in his songwriting.
It would have been weird doing Speak and Spell Part 2 with the nature of Martin's songs. They were much more complex melodically. I just don't think it would have worked to make that kind of record. So I think they definitely wanted to spread their wings and work in a different way.
The technical side of it had moved on, so it was a bit easier to work, and if you recorded something on day 1 which you didn't like on day 4, then it was easier to go back and replace that. Whereas before, if you're on the 8-track and you'd have bounced it in with some other sounds, you're kind of stuck with it.
It was more sort of how we would record an album now, because we hadn't been playing a lot of these songs live. So it was putting them together from scratch.
You were set up for a fall, so people weren't expecting a lot of it. You know, your main songwriter's gone. As I say, it was very, very tribal. A lot of people into lots of different kinds of music. So, you know, what Depeche Mode did, you know, within that area of music, people just thought, oh, that's okay, but, you know, they're not going to have the big hits like they used to.
Okay, this is See You.
We didn't have a vision at all. We were sort of torn between being a pop band on smash hits and sort of a cooler alternative band.
Peel was playing the band, Peter Powell was playing the band, Janice Long was playing the band. So in terms of the credible end of Radio 1, the after 4 o'clock going into the evening, the where you wanted, as a promotion man, you absolutely wanted your band to be embraced. They were embracing the band. It was more the guys in daytime radio who just didn't really didn't quite understand a band that were all keyboards.
Neil knew that it was going to be really hard to get over on the radio, and of course they hated it. By that time we were already hated by radio DJs, and they would often comment on how doomy we were.
When See You came out, I don't think it did, in terms of trying to get to where I wanted to get, achieve very much more. Yeah, we got on the radio, yes, we did some TV. We probably did some TV in those days that we shouldn't have done, which I kind of felt was probably my fault, but I was so desperate to move the band forward and to get more people to know about them and to break the band into a bigger arena, that we probably did stuff that, you know, in retrospect, I probably would never have allowed them to do if I'd have been a few years older.
We were just so young and stupid that we agreed to everything that anyone offered us. Yeah, and there was always an argument, you know, goes out to so-and-so million people. Okay, we'll do it, you know.
Looking back, of course we overdid the real pop stuff, but it was sold to us that, you know, we really needed to do those things if we wanted to keep having hit records. And so we just did everything that came along. I mean, as time went on, we became a bit more choosy, but that fear of being forgotten, I think, was always there.
See You, which was the first single from Broken Frame, was probably more poppy than the singles from Speak and Spell in a way, but a lot of the other songs on Broken Frame are much darker, like Francie said. So
the video for See You wasn't particularly dark, was it?
No.
It surprised me that it became as big as it became. But from our side of stuff, it was early days. They still weren't kind of ready. So we were in the comfort zone.
We're generally very sort of like pessimistic people, But for a very short period, we felt a little bit invincible. And when Meaning of Love came out, we expected it to do even better.
But despite all the places I've looked, it's still no clearer, it's just not enough. I'm still no nearer the meaning of love.
I remember it gone in the charts at number 5. And you know, we sort of think it might go to number 1 and stuff. When we got off the airplane and got the chart, it was like gone down to 17.
And that was our first jolt of failure, even though it still got fairly high. It felt like a disappointment after See You.
Everybody was a bit shocked by that, but it wasn't one of their best singles.
Daniel thought that Gallup must have made a mistake.
It was a bit too teeny.
I don't blame the press for not giving us much respect in those days. There was, lots of like teen magazines around, like Smash Hits and things like that. And, we did a lot.
The whole credibility angle, and I can't stress, the importance of that as much. I mean, in those days it was vital. It was like, okay, we don't want to be interviewed, but we can put out a side of us that people are going to have to pay attention to. So artwork was the first kind of public sign of there is something more to this band. At the time, there were a lot of journalists who were all ex-art school, etc. So the link was being made. These guys, they might not make the music, but they're beginning to be fairly savvy in other areas.
Well, it was remarkable. I remember when I first saw the Polaroid, it was just unbelievable. And so after I processed them all up and Daniel came down to Rotherhithe here, to the studio.
I popped down to have a look and I'm just looking on the light box and I seen these images, I just thought they were fantastic. I couldn't quite believe how strong it was.
When we actually saw the cover, we thought it was quite a stunning picture. And it did go on to win awards.
It was Sleeve of the Year, wasn't it? And it's just an amazing picture. Fantastic picture. He made up for Speaking Spell.
I think it's one of the best things that we've done, actually.
Probably the greatest colour photograph ever taken, I think. I've been egotistical enough to say that and say, okay, find me a better one.
Brian had an idea for a photograph, of some person kind of breaking the frame of the photograph. But I think I consciously wanted to steer it more in that kind of Russian iconic imagery because it was something that I kind of liked the look of. Daniel was very much into.
We did have heavy discussions about it. So I would say it was a complete collaborative idea, really.
Brian would just come to the studio and talk about things, and we wouldn't have a clue what he was saying because it was art talk, He'd just go, yeah, I can see this, the field, We'd go, all right, just do it,
So we all set off in this location bus with my assistant Stuart Graham, Jackie Fry, the lady who's going to be the peasant. And it was just pouring with rain, just horrible. But one thing in photography is that rain can be really good because when rain stops, the sky can become very interesting.
We had hailstorms and rain and all sorts of stuff. But, Brian's ego will probably tell you that, he did it all himself. Wouldn't you, Brian?
And Martin Atkins said he came up on his motorbike. He said, well, I've got to go out and get lunch then, So he rode off on his motorbike for lunch. Then the rain stopped.
It was just one of those, as he would say, the magic was there, It was the magic. It was the magic.
What use is a souvenir?
be honest with you, I think the songwriting has got so much better. It's so superior to the early days.
It was not completely mature, the personality of Martin at the time of Broken Frame.
It still seemed quite poppy. I think Martin's depth came a bit later.
You know, for me, it really doesn't work as a whole, because, you know, some of the songs I'd written when I was 16 and we were, like, you know, reinventing them as electronic songs. You know, some of the songs I was making up in the studio, and, you know, I think it's probably, you know, for me, probably our worst album.
It was so difficult for us at that time, in retrospect. First of all, we'd lost our main songwriter. The second album syndrome is that usually you get, like, slaughtered anyway, no matter what you do. And we kind of made this moody, odd-sounding record.
And maybe by going with something like Leave in Silence was quite a bit of a reaction to that, to go with something that was much more, which was darker, and that was kind of the beginning of their so-called darker phase, really, Leave in Silence, that carried on to this day.
I look back fondly on Leave in Silence. I think that was a turning point for us, and realised that maybe that was, you know, a way to go forward.
Leave in Silence was kind of like a watershed. That's where things started to come together, where they started to take themselves fairly seriously.
We felt, I think, more comfortable in that mood. That was definitely where Martin was, melodically. And I've always said, and I've always thought, Martin writes beautiful melodies. And lyrically, it's just a lot more melancholy.
Put it to one side. This is not a pop group. This is not a band that's making 3-minute crappy pop songs. This is a band that's got longevity. This is a band that you want to go and see live.
Like Leave in Silence came together really easily, and we just got a groove going, and it just felt right instantly. And then I think one of my favourite songs on the record is The Sun and the Rainfall. I love that song.
It's a really good song, but I'm a big believer that songs that are put at the end of albums, you know, always get lost. And that's one particular really good song that I think gets lost because it's the last track of the album.
They'd led the audience to their space as the key, so it was no problem. Now obviously, if their audiences decided they didn't like the tougher stuff, they could have been in a lot of trouble. But they didn't, so they were fine.
People started to see things were happening, that they weren't going to disappear, that there was, you know, an intelligence at work, and that there was, you know, they were forging ahead in, you know, in their own direction. That they are, you know, sort of breaking their own territory at their own pace, and you know, it's this innate sense of timing. It was becoming apparent that, you know, they were here to stay.